Welcome back, Wulfpak. Today's video is a bit different than the usual programming on this channel. However, it's a project I'm extremely passionate about bringing to you. This is part 1 of 3, but please make sure to like this video if you enjoy it to see more deep dives like this in the future. Without any further ado, today's video is part 1 of my comics deep dive into Matt Reeves' upcoming The Batman. This series will follow the main storylines either confirmed or heavily alluded to being inspiration for Matt Reeves' film. With that being said, this involves 2 confirmed influences and 1 heavily speculated story that would seemingly fit in perfect with the world that Matt Reeves seems to be creating. As I'm sure you've guessed by now, each episode will represent an individual storyline that I will first break down for you, and then explain how I believe we will see it come to life in $0?1? Seriously, what's up with that? Now, I won't tell you what the other 2 episodes will entail, but I will give you a hint at the end of this episode as to what the next story will be. You also get to find out what this week's episode is about right now. I am very excited to kick off this series by bringing you into the interesting world that is Darwyn Cooke's Batman Ego. Batman Ego is a comic from the year 2000, written and illustrated by Darwyn Cooke. Darwyn was a good friend to major names in the industry around his time, such as Bruce Timm and Paul Dini. It comes then as no surprise that some of his most remembered work comes from his times during the new Batman/Superman adventures, and cult favorite, Batman Beyond. However, it's this other Batman gem that I think is his most iconic work. Besides giving context, another reason I bring up Cooke's work on these animated shows is because you will see that the artwork in Batman Ego looks very familiar to a certain animated series we know and love. In fact, I challenge anyone to read this graphic novel and not do it in Kevin Conroy's voice. This story begins 3 years into Bruce's campaign as the Caped Crusader. Batman is dealing with the aftermath of a killing spree, seemingly committed by the Joker, leaving 27 people dead. We see Batman lamenting that he seems to be getting used to the pain and death. Batman then expresses that he knows the identity of Joker's driver, Buster Snibbs, and that Snibbs knows he can't hide from the Dark Knight. We also learn that the reason Batman knows this is because he recently convinced Snibbs to give up Joker's location. Snibbs was somehow able to then take off with Joker's cash while Batman was confronting the Crown Prince of Crime.
Nice.
We then see Batman running from rooftop to rooftop until his knees give out while he's climbing up a wall. It's only then that we see Batman is bloodied and in terrible shape with his left arm wrapped up. Batman also seems to be losing hope that Gotham can be saved or changed. We see him continue his chase and eventually pick up Buster's trail. The Bat is ready to strike when he notices Buster pull over in the middle of a bridge. Batman deduces that Buster must have stashed Joker's cash at the top of the bridge when he sees him start to climb. Batman realizes that Buster is about to swan dive, but instead of Uncle Scrooge's pile of cash, Buster's jumping into the Gotham Bay. At seemingly the last second, Batman wraps a bat hook around Snibbs' ankle to prevent him from falling. Batman also realizes that there's nowhere to tie off the hook, and he slams his bad shoulder into a concrete wall at 35 miles per hour while acting as Snibbs' counterweight. After using his last bit of strength to pull Buster up, Buster expresses his dissatisfaction at being saved and actually pulls a gun on Batman. Batman realizes Buster is concerned about Joker's retaliation for being double-crossed, and tells Snibbs that this is unnecessary, because as of last night, the Batman put Joker away. Snibbs tells Batman that Joker will break out, as he eventually always does, and when that happens, both he and his family will not be safe. Buster then says the unspeakable. He admits the only way that he could ensure that the Joker didn't kill and torture his family was if Buster killed them himself. Before Batman can even react to this terrible news, Buster lifts the gun to his head and pulls the trigger. We then see Batman frantically driving back to the cave as he's tormented by flashbacks of Hugo Strange and Mayor Hill, both accusing the Batman of schizophrenia. Finally, Batman gets one flash of what seems to be Buster in hell, repeating his last words to the Bat. "See you in hell, you masked lunatic!" It is at this point that Bruce arrives at the cave and has a mental breakdown, ultimately leading him to explain the events of tonight's actions to a picture of his parents. Coming to the climax of his breakdown, Bruce ultimately decides he simply cannot handle the mantle of being Batman anymore, and begins to drift off to sleep. He's suddenly awoken about 20 seconds later. Yes, they actually state it was exactly 20 seconds, by a guttural voice screaming, "You fool!" It is then that Bruce turns his attention to the Batcomputer due to a sudden case of 30-foot-tall demon Batman. Bruce quickly realizes he's in for an interesting night of arguing with himself, but realizes that this is too crazy to be possible. He asks Demon Batman who he really is, but we all know how asking Batman his real identity works out.
We can lead ourselves.
Batman tells Bruce that he knows exactly who he is and exactly why he's there, like a certain bad guy we all know and love.
You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here.
Batman then scolds Bruce for looking and talking to pictures of his parents, accusing him of being sentimental, and saying Christmas must be hard. Batman then gives Bruce a harsh reminder of why his parents aren't around anymore, by altering his Christmas morning picture to have more bony guests. Batman then reminds Bruce that Snibs and his family have recently joined his parents in the afterlife, and he's not going to let him forget it anytime soon. Bruce is finally able to interrupt Batman's voiceover audition with the escape key. Seriously, dude, think you've had enough takes by now. Bruce chalks it up to blood loss and lack of sleep, which has to be pretty common for the Dark Knight. Suddenly, Demon Bat reappears, which leads to one of my favorite lines in this entire comic. "My God, perhaps, but lately, you've been lacking faith." Batman explains that he is not simply a costume that Bruce can cast off whenever he wants. Rather, he lives deep within Bruce's heart. In fact, he has been with Bruce ever since his introduction to vigilantes in the form of Zorro. For anybody that's unaware, Bruce's introduction to Zorro as a child is actually what first planted the seeds of a mass vigilante in his brain. In fact, in most accepted Batman canon, it was actually a Zorro movie that the Wayne family went to attend on the fateful and tragic night of their murder. Batman ego then takes a rather Dickensian twist, as Bat of Christmas Past takes Bruce on a stroll through memory lane with his folks. We see not only Bruce receiving his first Zorro figure here, but we see Thomas Wayne presenting his wife Martha with the infamous pearls. I'm not explaining the backstory on that. If you guys are unaware of the significance of those pearls, just go watch a Batman movie, any Batman movie. I'll wait. From here, we see another flashback, but this time we visit the Waynes during dinner. It's a snowy night, and Thomas Wayne receives a late-night house call. He decides to bring Bruce with him, and Bruce brings Zorro with him. During the drive, Bruce states that he doesn't understand why his mother was crying when she received her pearls, and Thomas tries to explain to his son what happy tears are. Bruce still just doesn't get it. We then see an amazing juxtaposition of Bruce singing the Zorro theme in the car and playing with his action figure while Thomas is frantically losing his patient inside. Bruce eventually comes inside due to boredom and sees Thomas's dead patient. Bruce and Thomas then make their way home together, and Bruce asks his father about death, specifically if he or his mother were going to die. Spoilers! Since we as readers are the wiser, it's even more heart-wrenching to see Thomas answer that he and Martha will indeed die someday, but not before their time. He then makes what we know is an unkeepable promise to Bruce, that his time is quite a long ways away. Batman states that this was the first night that Bruce felt Batman, but he wasn't fully unleashed. That didn't officially happen until the fateful evening when the Waynes decided to leave the theater early and take Crime Alley home. Seriously, this place is called Crime Alley and a billionaire family decides that this is the best place to go in the dark of night? I'm not gonna say they had it coming, but like, I don't see the train of thought here. You're not only billionaires, you're the most well-known family in Gotham. What were you? Nope. nope. Stop it, Brad. Let it go. It was at this time that Batman officially exploded into young Bruce's heart. His words, not mine. Batman explains how he watched Bruce grow from there and struggle with the loss of his parents. He explains that even when Bruce believed he was ready, he had still not come to terms with Batman. Now, it may sound weird hearing me say that Bruce hadn't come to terms with Batman as a child, teen, and young man. The reason for this, Batman explains, is that while Bruce refers to this entity as Batman, what he really is fear. While they were forced to eventually come together, Batman, because calling him fear just really sounds weird, explains that he has always lived and still does within Bruce. He explains that all these years Bruce has had the same purpose, and Batman provided the means to share their pain with those who deserve it. Batman further states that they used to be magnificent together, due to Bruce's relentlessness and thirst for vengeance. He also says that this lasted for quite some time, until Bruce's vanity and need for approval yielded to the call of celebrity. Batman explains that he has not only endured this, but also Bruce's pitiful need for companionship. Bruce explains that their cause necessitates allies, so Gordon and the GCPD are a necessary partnership. Batman laughs at Bruce while explaining he wasn't referring to Gordon, he was referring to Robin. Bruce makes the excuse that Robin can take care of himself, and before Batman can object, Bruce cuts him off, saying that he simply will not discuss it. Is that child abuse? Again, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but has CPS been called once? I don't think he's even a teenager. Once again, different rant, letting it go. Batman shifts the subject to their impact on Gotham by making the best argument against Batman that there is. He explains how street crime has dropped dramatically, however their crusade has given rise to a new menace. Batman then runs through the rogues gallery with Bruce, explaining how many supervillains they are responsible for. This culminates with Batman saying that one villain stands above the rest. This villain has killed more people than anyone else, and unlike his colleagues who kill for profit or power, this man kills simply for pleasure. Batman's only solution? They must kill the Joker. Bruce adamantly refuses and states he will not have blood on his hands. This makes Batman lose his remaining patience and, well, it's probably best if I read it straight from the source.
Bruce Wayne, humanitarian, you self-righteous hypocrite. You talk about the sanctity of human life, while you lie buried under scores of human victims. What about their lives? Are they simply the cost of upholding your cowardly morality?
Batman then recounts the night at Axis Chemicals when Bruce, to keep it less confusing, chases down Red Hood, causing him to fall into the vat of acid that eventually turned him into the Joker. Batman explains that every time he is caught and allowed to live, Joker just breaks free to kill again, and it's all due to Batman's code. Batman even accuses Bruce of keeping Joker around only because he's his arch nemesis. Batman again says that they need to kill the Joker, but Bruce continues to relent. Bruce explains how tragedy strikes indiscriminately, and Joker chose to handle losing his past life with madness. This is all fun and well coming from the grown adult that dresses as a bat due to daddy issues, but I digress. Bruce then acknowledges the insanity of the fact that he's arguing with Batman. He also makes a weird reference where he compares Batman to an undercooked potato. You really are losing it, huh, Brucey? Batman then uses the Force to push Bruce against the wall for making such a crappy joke. He then tells Bruce that should he choose to ignore him now, that it will be a huge mistake. He reminds Bruce of the oath he swore to his parents and to Batman that he would give his life to and for this crusade. He asks him what he's giving it up for. Wealth, snooty friends, yes men, disappointed women. This is actually done in a beautiful panel that results in Batman finishing the sentence of Bruce's last girlfriend. You're breaking my heart. Or should I say,
you're breaking my heart.
I really hope this Batman voice doesn't sound as crappy as I'm starting to think it does. I'm just gonna go with it. Bruce states that he's had enough of this madness, to which Batman says, bet, meaning that he will torment Bruce until the end of time if he abandons his mission as the Caped Crusader. Bruce ultimately agrees and states that he cannot break his promises that he made to his parents and to Gotham. Bruce admits that he still does not know how to carry on and to live with his failures, so he asks Batman for advice. Batman then presents his solution with a recalling of the tragedy of Harvey Dent. This concludes with Batman ultimately suggesting that they operate as two different personas entirely, just as Harvey and Two-Face do. Bruce immediately shoots down the idea because, duh? Batman continues to disagree and offers what he calls a more spiritual example. He mentions how ancient warriors, all the way up to modern soldiers, use mental conditioning to turn into someone else when needed. He then cuts Bruce to the core by mentioning how even his idol, Don Diego himself, turns into Zorro because even he understands there are certain casualties and sacrifices involved at the end of his sword. Bruce continues to relent as he states that he is no killer. Batman responds with a blunt yet darkly hilarious line.
I am painfully aware of that. I believe it has to do with your father being a healer. That, and the fact you saw your parents brutally murdered before your eyes.
Batman once again makes the suggestion of sharing a host body with two different minds, but Bruce is not a fan of self-induced psychosis. That, and he knows that unleashing an unchecked and unleashed Batman on Gotham will result in, well...
That's no good. That's no good. That's no good.
Batman finally concludes that they have reached a stalemate and have only one conclusion. Suddenly, a gun materializes into Bruce's hands, and Batman says that if they cannot work together, then he must be free. If Bruce is not willing to do what must be done, then he must kill Batman. It doesn't take Bruce long to realize that this is no ordinary gun, and Batman only confirms that this is indeed the very weapon that made Bruce Wayne an orphan all those years ago. Bruce seems to actually be considering this option. Almost looks ready to pull the trigger, but can't. Bruce sees a flashback of Snibs holding the gun to his head, and realizes that killing Batman would also be committing suicide. After hurling the gun away, Bruce laments on if this is actually how his life is meant to be. And Batman confirms that this is in fact their destiny, to protect those that still have a chance at a normal life. Batman urges Bruce that he has to accept this, to which Bruce responds, "The truth hurts." Bruce expresses that for this crusade to continue, that he must make clear one line that is never to be crossed. Batman must not kill. The reason for this is that it is the only difference separating Batman from the criminals that he takes down. While Batman is a symbol of fear to criminals, he is also a symbol of hope for Gotham. For that symbol to remain, I repeat, Batman must not kill. Now, I thought about the best way to put this without just sounding like a whiny fanboy, but honestly, Alex from High Top Films puts this way better than I ever could. With that being said, the link to his video explaining exactly why Batman shouldn't kill and why that's a giant detriment to his entire character is linked in the description below. So go ahead, check out to see that rule as to why, once again, Batman must not kill, but also see as to why I have just a little bit of an issue with the Tim Burton films. Yeah, I know, I said it. Want to fight about it? While you're there, don't forget to subscribe to him and let him know that Wolfman Brad sent you his way. The story concludes with Bruce expressing that if this one rule can be followed, then he can live with the enormous responsibility of Batman. It's like the old, with great power comes great responsibility, except instead it's, with great power to maim and potentially murder comes great responsibility. Suddenly, Batman poofs into a puff of smoke and bats, and a picture of Bruce's parents floats down from where he stood. We then see Bruce, now dressed as Batman, make it seemingly just in time for a hostage situation being perpetrated by Joker, and the story ends as he tells Gordon he's on his way. Batman Ego is a personal story, not just for Bruce Wayne, but also for Darwyn Cooke, as this story was a 70-page memorial to his father. It would also prove to be a standout story in the legacy left behind by Darwyn Cooke, as he himself succumbed to his own personal struggle in 2016, cancer. Batman Ego is a masterclass of an examination into the psyche of what it truly means to be Batman, but it's also an examination into what it's like to be a man, a parent, a child. Darwyn Cooke set out to tell a personal story about what it means to be Batman, and why only Bruce Wayne can do it. Never before, and in my opinion, never since, have we truly felt the weight of what it means to be Batman. What this story does so well is that it never allows us to forget every decision that Bruce makes has a consequence. And then it explores if and how Bruce can live with those consequences. Even something as simple as Batman dislocating his shoulder due to the way he catches snibs is not something that we normally see covered in your everyday Batman story. What I find ultimately saddest is that this story doesn't get anywhere near the praise that it deserves. You know, you hear very often of The Dark Knight Returns and The Long Halloween and The Killing Joke, but while sharing very similar themes, none of them are as raw of a story about Bruce Wayne. After reading and rereading this story multiple times, I can totally understand why Matt Reeves chose this story as the top influence for the Batman. What this also means is that we're in for a very interesting trilogy. How does this all tie together with the Batman, I hear you asking? Well, Matt Reeves' The Batman has been explained as a detective noir film, which we are sorely lacking in, especially for Batman. It's actually rather crazy to think that the world's greatest detective has never had a live-action film in which he was actually a detective. The closest we have ever actually come to that was Val Kilmer. Actually, he's currently my third favorite Batman. Once again, fight me. And even then, he was solving perhaps the simplest riddles ever known to mankind.
Riddle me this.
Riddle me this!
Riddle me this. Riddle me that. Who's afraid of the big black bat?
Now, while I would love to divert from this path and make comparisons between Jim Carrey's Edward Nygma and Paul Dano's Edward Nashton, because that's Riddler's real name, Edward Nygma was always an alias created by the Riddler. So it always bothers me when I hear people say, no, going into another rant. That's not why we're here. That's not why we're here. Instead, I will make the bold move of both speculating on and summarizing what the overarching journey will be for both Batman and Bruce Wayne over Matt Reeves' trilogy. The fact that Matt Reeves names this as his major influence for the story tells me that while this film is called The Batman, it should be called Bruce Wayne. What I believe Matt Reeves is suggesting by mentioning this story is that this series of films will be very personal for Bruce Wayne and how the world shapes around him. In fact, I believe that the two most important characters in these films will be obviously Bruce/Batman, but also Gotham City itself. Gotham has always reflected Batman just as Batman reflects Gotham. So it's my belief that this trilogy will have major themes of personal growth. To use Batman ego as a major influence is to say that the main goal of this trilogy is to not only explore Bruce, not only explore Batman, not only explore Gotham, but to explore the duality of how these two characters coexist within one psyche and the impact it has on the surrounding city. I believe that Matt Reeves will take many cues from Batman ego, including potentially having a dream sequence where Pattinson does indeed argue with himself. Let me explain my hypothetical timeline for how I believe Matt Reeves' trilogy will play out. With that being said, if any of this ends up being correct, spoiler warning, I guess? I believe we will see the story start off with Bruce Wayne having been back to Gotham for a few years now, but he still hasn't found his groove. This will be a Bruce Wayne fresh off his training with the League of Shadows, that is still very disconnected with his society and his emotions. This is a Bruce Wayne that has already made the decision to become Batman, but does not really grasp the responsibility of what that means. In fact, I think for a majority of the movie, we will see Bruce's only pillar, as well as being the only difference separating Batman from the criminals he takes down, be his no-killing rule. I believe that we will see Riddler and ultimately Penguin truly put Bruce's morality to the test. However, I'm willing to bet that the climax of this film will involve seeing Bruce stay true to his code and using his keen mind to outsmart the Riddler. I will repeat from earlier, please Please, please don't have Batman kill anybody in this film. I just ask for one movie where Batman is not content with blowing up people's cars. Or blowing up people. I also believe that the even larger theme of this film will see Bruce come to terms with his own duality by the end of the film. I've heard many complaints about the stoicism and, dare I say, emo demeanor of Bruce Wayne based on like 7 seconds of trailer footage. Mainly from a scene where he just pulls the cowl off and for obvious reasons has smeared eye makeup. As an aside, I freaking love this because I'm just sick and tired of seeing Bruce pull off the cowl and have a perfectly clean face. I mean, we all know you're wearing makeup, bro. It's 2020. Don't hide who you are. I really understand where people feel entitled to make a judgment call so early based on less than a minute of footage and even less audio, but I digress. I do slightly agree that Bruce seems to have a darker demeanor, but that fits perfectly with who he is as a person. He is 3 years into his crusade where he has yet to face any of his demons and is an orphan billionaire that runs around at night dressed as a bat so he can maim people. What do you expect? This guy? There is a story being told here, and I think we've just been inundated with media lately like Star Wars and more recently Mulan, where the main hero is depicted as simply perfect from day one. I think I can safely speak for a majority of the audience when I say that that's boring. Nobody wants to see little Miss/Mr. Perfect run around and do everything right all the time with absolutely no struggle. This is, as just mentioned, many fans' problems with the characters of both Rey and Mulan. Both start out as attractive people with superpowers that never fail at anything they do, even things they shouldn't be aware they have the ability to do. What this ends up doing is having said protagonists end up in pretty much the same spot at the end of the film that they were in the beginning. Now, I don't know about you, but there's nothing that turns me off more from a film than when I cannot connect with the protagonist, even through empathy of their growth over time. Now, as an aside real quick, just to point it out, I love Daisy Ridley and I actually love the character of Rey as well. I just believe that the execution of her character's arc was extremely lazy, and it just didn't resonate with the majority of the audience, obviously. Now, it's important for young women to have role models like Rey on the silver screen, it really is. However, character needs to be more than just girl power. You know who was really an icon of women's roles in film? Princess Leia. And it's not because she was able to beat every single opponent that she came in contact with. It's because even in the face of adversity, or even failure, Leia never lost her resolve. What was Rey's struggle again over 3 movies?
Let me see them. My parents. Please.
Oh, right.
Get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
All right. Anyway, I believe we will see Bruce accept his duality by the end of the film and understand that Batman must be separate from Bruce. Otherwise, the crazy recluse billionaire living on the edge of town that never really talks to anybody might seem like the perfect candidate for the crazy man that dresses as a bat at night. In fact, it is my belief that we will see a much more familiar Bruce Wayne by the end of the film, which will also be a very different Bruce Wayne than we see at the beginning. Batman Ego was all about Bruce coming to terms with how to exist as Batman, and from what I've seen so far, we seem to be full speed ahead on telling that story here. And I, for one, couldn't be more excited to see it. In fact, I believe Bruce will have so much character growth over this film that by the end of it, we're even going to see the blossoming relationship of Bruce Wayne caring for a recently orphaned Dick Grayson. That's right! You heard it here first on Wulfpak Gaming. I absolutely believe that we will see Robin introduced to these films as the Boy Wonder as soon as Matt Reeves' follow-up to this film. But here is where we're going to see those seeds planted. And Just between you and me, there have been rumors floating around that he's looking at casting for a teenage boy that's going to have a somewhat significant role in the film, so sounds like Robin to me. Well, there you have it. Episode 1 of my deep dive into Matt Reeves' The Batman and the stories that influenced it. I'm sure it goes without saying that I am extremely excited for this film. In fact, it is my most anticipated film right now. I'm expecting a totally different kind of Batman story. I'm even willing to bet that a majority of the Battinson haters will leave this new trilogy as it being their favorite. That's right, another bold prediction. But I believe these films will eventually be heralded as equal to, or even possibly better than the legendary Nolan trilogy. The star power is there, both in front of and behind the cameras. So it all comes down to hoping there are no more production snags or interference in the final cut from Warner Brothers. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I appreciate you taking the time to stick with me until the end. Between the research, the writing, the editing, this is hands down the most intensive video I've ever made, but it's also the most fun. And I want to thank you guys for sticking with me all the way until the very end. I love Batman with a passion, and have ever since I was a young child playing with the light-up Batmobile, super quipping Mr. Freeze, and of course, George Wayne. I mean Bruce Clooney. I mean Batman. Just Batman, complete with bat nipple action. And don't forget the Bat credit card, of course with an expiration date until forever. I was seriously extremely excited to bring this story to the forefront of people's minds, and hopefully from this video it begins to get the love and attention that it so much deserves. Thank you Darwyn Cooke and Bill Finger for contributing so much to my childhood. You may notice that I didn't say Bob Kane, and you know why? That's because Bob Kane can go f*** himself. Please join me for my next episode in this series, where we will deep dive into the next confirmed influence on Matt Reeves' The Batman. I'm hoping to get that next video to you guys sometime around Halloween, for 2 reasons in particular. First off, the research and editing for these videos, it's kind of extensive and intensive, especially for a full-time student. Second, it was your promised clue to the next video. Solve my riddle, Wulfpak, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be prepared for the end cap to Wolftober. Speaking of Wolftober, we'll be starting the festivities right here in the first week of October as I get some amazing horror action your way, so I expect to see every single one of your beautiful faces there for 31 days of frights and delights. Thank you guys again so much. Please don't forget to like this video, since it really helps my channel tremendously. Subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the awesome things that are going on over here, because it's a ton. There's a lot. I'm committed to you guys. What we have is real. And share this video with the favorite Bat fan in your life. I'll catch you guys next time. Same wolf time, same wolf channel, and this is the Wolf Man. Oh! Signing out.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.